part of the Earglue Media family of podcasts.
You're listening to Petticoats and Poppies.
History Girls at the Movies.
Welcome to Petticoats and Poppies, History Girls at the Movies. We're your hosts, Maggie and
Nicole.
Before we get into this long-awaited, very exciting episode, I thought it would be a really good idea for us to catch up with each other and with our listeners to kind of give a little overview of how things are going so far in 2022. Since the last time we recorded, I found out that I graduated from college, which was a big surprise to me. And that's a whole story that I will not get into on the podcast. But yeah, I graduated from the University of Wales, Trinity St. David, with a postgraduate degree in engaged anthropology with merit. So that is officially behind me, which is kind of cool since when we started this podcast, I was kind of like in my first semester and, just starting out and, or actually I was in my second semester and look at me, look at us now.
I'm so proud of you, honestly.
So glad it's over. Yeah. And then, I've been on a bit of a binge. Like I said in the last episode, I said I was going to go on a Daniel Bruhl binge, and I am a woman of my word. I commit to the bit, and I finished my 40th Daniel Bruhl movie night before last. I have 2 more to go. I saved one that I've already watched before, which is Inglourious Basterds, and then I have another foreign language film to watch, and I have also watched Captain America: Civil War, I think 6 times now. Did not foresee that becoming my comfort film of 2022, but here we are. And then, of course, Sundance is coming up, and I'm so excited about that and all the movies I plan to see there.
I'm so excited for you to be attending Sundance, officially as press. That's so cool.
It's so cool.
I'm really excited. I'm not attending as press this year. I'm just but I've bought some tickets. Gonna watch some movies, gonna review some movies, so I can't wait. Sundance is super exciting. And this is also, I guess, because of when this is going up, I can say, if you don't know, Sundance does right now, because they're totally virtual, you can buy virtual tickets. You don't have to be press or be there. Don't know what will be available by the time this podcast goes up, but if there's anything that you think you might be interested in, definitely go check it out, because it's pretty cool to be able to see films far in advance of when they might release, and be able to see what people are talking about.
And honestly, the prices are pretty comparable, all things considered.
They're not that bad, really. It's expensive if you try to see too many, but to just watch a handful is not bad at all. Last year I watched Mass at Sundance because I saw people talking about it, and I managed to snag a ticket, and Mass is still my favorite movie of 2021, so it's kind of funny that it's the first 2021 movie that I saw. But I'm really, there's some really, really cool things premiering this year at Sundance, so definitely go check it out. Yeah. Is there a movie that you are or a couple of movies that you're most excited to see?
I'm really excited for the Duel movie with Karen Gillan. Very excited for that one. It's a weird sci-fi thing that is reminiscent to some shows and movies that I watched last year that I really enjoyed. So I'm really excited for that one. I'm also really excited for Hatching, which is one of the body horror ones. I've kind of gotten into a kick with foreign language horror here recently. Really enjoying some of the stuff that they're doing with that. So I'm keen to see that one. And then there's another one by a Macedonian filmmaker that I'm really excited for. And I'm forgetting the name of it. But it was one of the first ones I got a ticket for. And then, of course, there's 2 Dakota Johnson movies. Always support my face twin. So I'm excited for those 2. And I really love seeing her doing more. I guess indie films. They're still indie films. Because they haven't been purchased or acquired yet. So
yeah.
Really like seeing her do some more nuanced roles.
That's so exciting.
Oh, and then Fresh, of course.
I was waiting for you to say Fresh. I can't wait to see Fresh. I also I love Daisy Edgar Jones as well. So
yes, me too.
It truly is everything, and I've heard it's going to be pretty intense. So I can't wait. Yeah, so I'm super looking forward to that. And I'm really really weirdly excited maybe. I'm seeing the Lucy and Desi documentary. Which I as you know, I grew up on I Love Lucy. My mom is obsessed with Lucille Ball, and I want to cleanse myself of being the Ricardos with this documentary. So I'm really looking forward to it.
It looks like it's gonna be really good. I did not get a ticket for that one. I saw a couple documentaries at TIFF, and I was like, I don't know if documentaries and I are good friends or not. So I wanted to focus more.
That one's also one that's definitely going to end up with a
undoubtedly
an actual release. Because that's the weird thing about Sundance is that sometimes there are movies that premiere at Sundance and then don't get bought by anyone, so they just never come out. Yeah, they just kind of vanish into the other. So that's the thing about seeing things there is you're never sure is this going to be a real movie?
And I feel like that's one that's going to go on to other film festivals that I will undoubtedly cover. So I'm I'll catch it later.
You can catch it later. Yeah.
I watched Julia. I really enjoyed Julia. And then that was last year. And then I saw that, there's a Princess Diana documentary, but I kind of feel
The Princess. Yeah.
I do kind of feel like I've gotten enough Princess Diana for a while. I feel like if this had come out last year, I might have been yes. But now I'm
another friend of mine was I am Diana'd out.
I'm buying it out.
Yeah. I'm really excited too. There's 2 movies I'm seeing, a documentary and a narrative film. It's Call Jane and the Janes, I think. And what's really cool is that they're about the same thing. And I don't know if that was done on purpose. I don't know if they're related in any way. I've got to do a little bit more research to try and get to the bottom of that. But I'm really excited to be able to sort of see a recent, but a period drama, and then see a documentary to sort of give me an idea of how truthful it's being. Because I've never, I don't remember that ever happening in the same year before. Actually, that's a lie. I think the RBG, documentary came out the same year as that movie, but I think that's gonna be a really fun thing. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So everyone, make sure you're following Maggie on Twitter and stuff so that you can see all of her tweets about the movies that she watches and her reviews as they come out. Okay, yeah, but you're gonna have a lot more than I am. So
many. It's so weird because I always dreamed of going to Sundance, just as a patron or just as attending, and then
one of these days we're gonna go in person.
Yes,
together.
Honestly, I don't know how I will be able to cope with in-person film festivals because I love the digital thing because I can map out my day and I can have bathroom breaks and lunch breaks and not get altitude sickness.
Yep. I really want to go to a film festival in person once we can again. I'm really hoping that by TIFF this year, in person's gonna be a thing. I would love to go to TIFF in person.
If we can bully the Middleburg Film Festival into telling how to get tickets, you could come up here.
Oh my god, I would love to do that
because we get
absolutely
cool
love that.
We get
all
the
that's
cool people,
really
but,
true.
It's 20 minutes from my house, and they will not respond to me about tickets.
Oh god, we have a really nice film festival here in North Carolina, but I just I would love to go to one of the
Dakota Johnson went last year to the
ones.
Middleburg Film Festival, and I was my face twin is 20 minutes from me, and I am not there.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got to figure it out this year.
We have to figure it out. Because I saw a bunch of people on Twitter that, I'm friends with that, got tickets, and I was
I know some people who went, so next year we'll talk to them and be hey, how do we do this?
We'll figure it out.
Exciting. So stay tuned for film festivals with me and Maggie, and
so much.
I think, maybe going forward, especially if we get to go to one together, it would be fun to do a special episode, maybe
yes, on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god, that'd be so fun. Okay,
pure chaos.
So yeah, in terms of what I've been up to, I just started my second semester of grad school, which is funny because Maggie's done with grad school. I'm just a quarter of the way through mine, but things are going really well. I'm really excited about my classes this semester. I also just this past week did the Podcasting Institute at the National Humanities Center. A really fun fact is that the National Humanities Center is actually like in North Carolina, which I did not know until this year, which is so random. I don't know why it's not in like DC. But it is here. And I was recommended to this Podcasting Institute, which is like a week-long workshop on how to integrate podcasting into the humanities, how to sort of use it to reach people, because obviously as a scholar in the humanities, there is this sort of issue of like, typically the be all end all of scholarship is to write like a journal article that like no one will ever read. And so there's sort of a movement right now in the humanities to think about other ways to reach people, and podcasting is like a really good one. So the National Humanities Center runs this Podcasting Institute with the University of San Diego. And they essentially teach you all this stuff in terms of like the technical side of how to podcast, as well as having a lot of discussions around like how you can utilize podcasting in the humanities. So I learned a lot of stuff. It was really fun. It was really cool. It was very challenging. I'm also like came back from being on vacation with my family Sunday night and then started my first week of classes for the semester and did that on Monday, which was wild. I was in the institute like with breaks for class from like 11 to 7 every day. So I am exhausted, but I feel really like motivated right now and really excited about ideas that I have. So really excited to have done that. And otherwise, yeah, it's award season. And I somehow ended up being an award season blogger. Basically, I do a lot of prediction and
so many predictions
stuff. God, yeah, I update my predictions every week over at Next Best Picture. Switching off weeks, doing above the line and below the line. If you're interested in who I think is winning Oscars, you can go over to nextbestpicture.com, and every week you'll have updated predictions from me. I also do frequent podcasting over at Music City Drive-In, talking about who I think is winning certain awards. So if you're interested in like what I think is going to happen at the Oscars, you can find it there. But that means that this is like the busiest time of year for me as a awards person. So I'm reaching the point in the year where I don't want to think about movies from 2021 anymore, because I'm just exhausted of thinking about them over and over. But the movie we're talking about today and our next episode too, tiny spoiler that it is a 2021 film, are movies for this award season that I actually could talk about literally forever and never get tired of.
Same. And this is one that has not officially come out yet.
Yeah, this is I could talk for days about how I think this studio has messed up the release of this film.
They're doing it so dirty.
They're doing it so bad. This film could be dominating award season if the studio was not messing up. But so, as you know from the title, I don't know why I always like talk around what we were talking about as though people have not seen the episode title. I don't know why I try to like
it's a big
make
surprise.
You a surprise. Yeah, like surprise. In case you can't read. We are talking about the musical romantic drama Cyrano, which premiered back at TIFF, which feels like ages ago. And will be released in theaters in the US and the UK like later this winter. I don't know. I think they just
maybe January, maybe February, maybe March.
Who the hell knows at this point? It is based on the 1897 play Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond. Is it
Rostand?
Rostand? Okay. And it is directed by Joe Wright, who is one of my favorite directors, but doesn't always do good by me. And written by Erica Schmidt. The movie stars Peter Dinklage, Haley Bennett, Kelvin Harrison Jr., and Ben Mendelsohn. If you are saying I didn't know any of those people could sing, neither did I. It is an adaptation of the stage musical, which ran, I think it was basically like just before the pandemic. It felt like it was just before the pandemic starting, at least, in New York. And it was nominated. The Golden Globes is like a dirty word right now, but it was nominated for Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy and Best Actor Musical or Comedy at the Golden Globes. I really do think that the studio has sort of like bungled its release in terms of getting it in at the Oscars for the most part, but I am keeping the faith and hoping that Peter Dinklage is going to get nominated at the Oscars. We'll see. But like everyone join me in trying to manifest that happening, please.
I need it. I need Hollywood to see him as a leading man. He's so good.
That's the thing. And he's had such a good career already that I really think it's like time for him to have an Oscar nomination like this in the like best actor category. So we'll see. It's one of the best performances of the year in 100%. The lead actor category, like hands down. So first of all, I want to say I'm obsessed with how many movie musicals we've had this year.
We were blessed.
It's been like an unprecedented year. And I will also say I am someone who is notoriously hard on movie musicals. I think like because I have such a love of both theater and film, I'm like very unforgiving of them in some ways. Mm-hmm. And you know, I actually have liked most of them this year. There's only been one that I've hated.
Yeah, we don't talk about that one.
It was Cinderella.
We don't talk about that one, and we don't talk about the other one.
Wait, no, I'm like, was there another one that I hated? What else?
Dear Evan Hansen?
Oh, yeah. I didn't. Okay, here's the thing, though. I literally forgot that I hated that because I hated Cinderella so much more.
It's like those are the two that like
those are the two that are like
compete.
Okay, here's the thing though. Here's the thing about Dear Evan Hansen. I actually did like Dear Evan Hansen the movie better than Dear Evan Hansen the stage show. So at least there's that. Like
there's that.
There is
a small bright spot.
I didn't think it was a bad adaptation. I actually thought it was a pretty good adaptation of a show that I don't like. So we'll give it that. But I loved In the Heights. I loved Annette. I really loved Annette more than anyone else loved Annette.
You are Baby Annette's biggest fan.
I am. Baby Annette is my baby. I love Baby Annette.
Baby Annette,
my whole life.
All of our baby.
I mean, yeah, Baby Annette for Oscar host 2K22. Make it happen. I loved Cyrano. I loved Tick Tick Boom. Obviously, I'm like the hugest Tick Tick Boom fan. This is like one of the few days this week I've not had my Tick Tick Boom sweatshirt on. We've been very blessed, but I do think that Cyrano is one of the best examples of a director really like taking advantage of the medium of film to bring a musical to life. I am also very obsessed with the fact that I'm very lucky. This year, my two favorite directors that are both very hit and miss directors have given me great films. So thank you to Joe Wright and to Kenny Branagh for actually making me good movies. Neither of your previous films made me think that was going to happen. Rip to Artemis Fowl and The Woman in the Window.
Woman in the Window.
Yeah, so like the fact that Belfast and Cyrano are the follow-up films to those two films is genuinely fascinating to me. But like the Joe Wright of Cyrano is the Joe Wright of Pride and Prejudice and Atonement and Anna Karenina. And it's so nice to see him again because I thought he might be dead. Like, I didn't know if we were getting him back.
He died at war. I'm so sorry.
Like, I thought he had, because I really don't think Joe Wright has made like a great film since Anna Karenina. That's, I mean, if anyone listening is wondering like if that's Darkest Hour slander, it is.
For a while I was convinced that he could only make a good movie if Keira
Knightley was there. Okay, I thought so too. So the fact that like Keira Knightley's not in this and it's a great movie is fascinating to me. Like, was Keira Knightley just like sitting on set somewhere? Like, let me know.
Be like, your muse is here.
Yeah, right.
Be
like,
not afraid.
No, actually, what's fascinating about that though is one of my favorite things about this movie is the fact that the male lead is the writer's husband and the female lead is Joe Wright's partner. So maybe that helped. Like, maybe he's got a new muse. Does he need to have Haley Bennett in all of his movies from here on out? I would not be opposed to that. But this is Joe Wright at his best, I think. And it's really interesting, too, because I thought that Anna Karenina was so theatrical that, like, it almost feels like it should be a musical. Mm-hmm. And so it was really nice to see him sort of using some of those same ideas visually, I feel like, in this movie. I love this production design. It's gorgeously lavish. It's like over the top without ever being garish, which I think is actually like a very difficult thing to achieve. And I love it. I love the theatrical quality of the whole film, like, which I think also like lends itself really well to being a musical. It's definitely one of those films that you never question why it's a musical, and that like the emotions always feel heightened. There's already this sense of like almost whimsy to it that it just makes sense. Other things I'm obsessed with include the color of Haley Bennett's hair in this movie. Everything about her hair, I'm just like, give it to me. I think the performances are fantastic all around. I think Peter Dinklage is phenomenal. I think Haley Bennett's really great, and her voice is like surprisingly lovely. I think Kelvin Harrison Jr. is great. I love Dumb Himbo Men.
I love Dumb Himbo Men so
I
much.
love a Dumb Himbo, and Christian, as played by Kelvin Harrison Jr., is like the peak of Dumb Himbo Men, and I love that for him. I love the cinematography in this. I think there's some really lovely shots. There's in that early scene where Haley is Roxanne is in the carriage going to the theater, and they play with like either showing her in the carriage and the reflection of the people dancing in the street, or showing the dancing in the street with the reflection of her in the carriage window. I think is so beautiful, and the way that they like play with reflection in the film is really fun. Roxanne going out with a horrible man for like, by the way, to get free theater tickets, icon. I literally watched this and I was like, I am so dumb. Why did I not do that when I lived in New York City? Like, I could have been going out with finance bros and seeing Broadway shows for free. I messed up. So Roxanne, teach me your ways. Roxanne is also just like a mood in many ways. Although so is Cyrano. Like, the reason I'm single is because I relate to both Roxanne and Cyrano.
I relate to Cyrano so much.
I relate to both of them, and that's how you know I will probably never have a relationship. Like, yeah, the fact that I'm playing both sides of that equation. Messy.
Yeah.
Messy. Like, on one hand, like, I'm always pining, but on the other hand, like, I see things and I'm like, I need more than that. Like,
the way
not gonna cut it.
Will be the architect of my own demise by being like, instead of admitting that I have feelings, why don't I help this person find somebody else to be in love with?
I've literally done that multiple times.
Well, how many times have I said, don't Cyrano yourself into this? Like, the fact that
there was a time in high school where I literally was writing text messages for a friend to get with the guy that I had a crush on.
Me too.
We are modern Serenaded Bergeracs. Love this for us, also hate this for us. But I also am the person who like has had up, not recently, let's be very clear about that, but like in younger years, had opportunities to have relationships. It was like, I need more than that. Like, that's not enough. Like, yikes.
Love this for us. I hate
Love this for us. Truly. When Cyrano says my sole purpose on earth is to love Roxanne, that was the moment I knew, and that comes like fairly early in the film, but that was the moment I knew. I was like, this movie was made for me. Like, I was like, we're vibing me in this film. I think, okay, I'm about to be a little shady about a movie that I know that you like, but we've had a lot of movie musicals this year. What we have learned is that directors, even very, very good directors, even legendary directors, do not always know how to show choreography on film. Spielberg, I love ya. I love ya, man, I do. The way that he filmed the choreography of West Side Story, I think, was often working against the choreography. And I think that what Joe Wright does is work with the choreography here. He's always giving you shots, like, he gives you wide shots when you need them. There were so many times in West Side Story, I was like, I would love to see what the dancers are actually doing, but I can only see part of their body right now. And particularly as a former dancer myself, I was like, just let me see what they're doing, man. And I think that Joe Wright actually like worked with the choreo really nicely to like build with it and like go into its momentum and stuff and show us what we needed to see of it to understand what was being shown, like what was the actual dancing in a really lovely way. And I think that that like really speaks to his skill as a director, because, you know, not every director can direct a musical, and I think that he proved that he can, which is really exciting. I think the best scene in the whole, well, I have two best scenes in the whole film. One is the balcony scene. Incredible. Peak filmmaking. RT, if you cry every time, because I know that I do. And yes, I've watched this like multiple times. The other one is the Wherever I Fall scene, which First of all, shout out to the fact that Glenn Hansard is in this. Like, hello. He showed up and I was like, what are you doing here? But also that scene is so just like heart-wrenching and so like out of the blue. Like all of a sudden you're crying for these characters that you've never seen before.
And we'll never see again.
And we'll never see again. Like each character has like a verse and like, yeah, I'm crying for every one of them. Like, how did they do that? A huge shout out to the National for the music of this film. I have been listening to this soundtrack literally at least several times a week since the day that it dropped. I am in love with this music. I think it's really unusual music for a musical, and yet it really works. It says like a lot about me that like two of the musicals I'm most obsessed with this year are Annette and this, which is to say that like I don't think every band could write a musical, but I think when a band can figure out how to write a musical, it's a really special thing. And I'm really. Do you think I like this movie, Maggie?
I can't tell. I really cannot tell.
It's a good thing that like you don't like it, so we're gonna be balanced here, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah,
no. Uh-oh.
Such a terrible movie.
I love when I'm not playing bad cop because I feel like on this podcast I play bad cop so often. I know, but like so often I feel like I'm always playing bad cop on this podcast, and like I'm not doing it today, and it's really fun.
This is one of those rare times that we are in agreement solely and completely.
It's true.
So I have a huge love for Serenaded Bergerac. It was like one of the first plays I read as a young reader. I watched the Gerard Depardieu Cyrano numerous repeated times throughout my, I'd say from like elementary school into high school. Like, loved Cyrano de Bergerac, love everything about that play. Please find me another person who was in elementary school and loved Cyrano de Bergerac, because I really do feel like I was the only one. Because it's just such a random thing.
Yeah.
But when I was in high school, I was dual enrolled in college, and I was in a directing class where I had the privilege and honor to choose a play to direct, and I directed Serenaded de Bergerac. And that involved basically taking the entire script apart page by page and assigning like motives and intent and emotion and action onto every single piece of dialogue. I had a show Bible for the entire show. I know that show inside and out. It has waned over the years as I had to allow my brain to make room for more pertinent information. But it's still in there. It's still filed away low at some window. I still remember some of Roxanne's lines. Some Hidalgo of man would have stayed, all of that fun stuff. I loved Roxanne, but I was admittedly very, very hesitant about this adaptation. I remember whenever the news about the stage production was out, I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Like, I really like some of the changes that people had talked about, but then the pandemic happened, and I just feel like not enough of the general audience had gotten to see it on stage that I could like form an opinion of like what was going to happen when this was announced. And then I was like, okay, well, if Joe Wright is involved, like it's going to at least be a good period drama. And I was like, maybe we'll see. Very much in the same as Nicole being like, is this going to be good, or am I going to be very, very disappointed? So I went in very green to this movie. I watched the trailer whenever it dropped only one time. And I kind of like half-heartedly watched it because I was like, oh, this looks really good, like visually. I really like the visuals of it, but like I wasn't sold yet. And I somehow missed that it was a musical. Just like, I've seen so many movies in the last 2 years. I've consumed so much content that I somehow missed that it was a musical. So then when they started singing as I'm watching my screener, I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And why is this amazing? Because there was a 1980s Cyrano de Bergerac musical that I actually watched like 10 years ago this week. Facebook reminded me, and I was like, well, things do repeat. And it was terrible. It was like super synth, super 80s. I think it was wanting to be like the next Phantom of the Opera. or Les Mis or something like, oh yes. Yeah, probably more like Les Mis, because Les Mis really leans into like the synth 80s vibes. It was just bad. So I was like, oh no, it's a musical. Like, what if it's not good? But then I was like, wait, this music sounds really familiar. Like this was reminding me of like Folklore and Evermore. And I was like, wait, it's the Dresner Brothers. That's why it sounds like Folklore and Evermore. So I really vibed with the music, and I am like, maybe it's a controversial opinion for like musical theater fans, but my other favorite movie musical is La La Land, and like Ryan Gosling's a fine singer, but he's not a great singer, and Emma Stone's a fine singer, but she's not a great singer. And so I really like authentic, natural, like if we just started singing, we wouldn't sound perfect. And so I really felt like, even though none of this cast of Cyrano are professionally trained singers, they can all carry a tune, and they can all convey the emotion that is necessary to make these songs what they are. And I think it works really well into the benefit of the production of the musical. I think it makes it much more raw and much more heartfelt and much more sympathetic. Because I don't know if everybody is like you and I when it comes to pining. Like, a lot of people can find that to be very trite, but I think somehow the music and the lyrics really help to bolster that story and to really make those connections that we're looking for, particularly the balcony scene. I thought that was so good. So good. And the letter scene with like the letter, like just everything. Like there was just so many little moments that I was just like, yes, this is what I am looking for. And Peter is just so good as Cyrano, and I love everything they did with changing the character and how it just works so well for a reinvented Cyrano de Bergerac story. And the story is just, it's about pining, and he's so good at pining, and I just need him to do more romantic leads, because
who knew that he was so good at pining?
He's so good at pining.
I'd like to keep this man booked and busy.
Put him in rom-coms. Put him in like more pining. Like
I want to see him do more period dramas, honestly.
I'm so glad that his wife was like, who would be good for this? My husband. Like, thank you so much for that, for giving us this gift. There are, like, I will say, as much as I praised the music and lyrics, there are a few lyrics that are anachronistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Particularly in the first song, that did take me out, and I did pause, and I was like, I need to prepare myself for not liking this. Like, I literally like took a walk, because I was like, oh my god, like I was really driving with it, and then like that happened, and I was just like, I just, for some reason, like anachronistic things just like take me out of the moment, especially with the period drama. And then I try to be like, okay, I can be forgiving of this because it's in the lyrics, it's not in the text. The lyrics are a little bit more whimsical, a little more pulling you out of the moment. It's okay, it works for the effect. But I still was like, that's a choice. I will find a lyricist, we will have a chat. And it was for like the benefit of a joke, and the joke didn't really even land super well, and I was just like, whatever. It got much better from there. That was like right in the first act and like the second scene, and then from there I was like, I can forgive and forget until this podcast. But they also made some other changes. I know I complained about this a little bit to Nicole. Like, they changed the fact that like Cyrano and Roxanne are no longer cousins, they're childhood friends, which kind of doesn't work because they're very different ages, and I was like, that's a little weird. But
yeah,
I was like, it still doesn't work. Like, I know modern audiences have like an issue with like cousins, but like historically speaking, it makes a lot more sense than childhood friends, because he's at least a good 20 years older than Roxanne.
They should have said like he's a friend of her family's, and that would have made more sense.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, if you had just looked at the text a little bit longer and seen why it worked for cousins but not for childhood friends, because the cousin makes more sense because it's like around the family. But I'm like, why was this 20-year-old man hanging around a child? But I will overlook it. That's another one where I'm just like, I'll overlook it. And again, I feel like a lot of adaptations make that mistake of like overlooking why certain things were the way they were, and it's the historian in me. Like, I pity the day that we get an Edgar Allan Poe adaptation or biopic because people will just not comprehend why he married his cousin.
Yep.
It was to protect her, but that's a whole other story. Look at the royal family. Everybody is intermarried. Just move on. Things happen in history. I also really like the way that Cyrano's death worked in this one. In the play, he has a log fall from a window and hit him in the head. Some other adaptations end up turning it into a flower pot, which I hate even more. I was so glad they fixed it because I thought that was the most ignoble death for Cyrano in the play and in the adaptations because it feels like it's played up for further jokes about this man who was a war hero and a soldier and a strong wordsmith to be felled by a log or something falling on his head. But I'm so glad they didn't do that. That was something I was like victoriously happy about. And that whole scene, I sobbed like a baby, and I had 5 minutes before I had to clock in for work, and I was like, composure, composure, composure. I pulled myself together. Also, Calvin Harris Jr., delightful as Christian, and his death also just put me through the ringer.
Yep, it hurt. It hurt real bad.
And not to knock the person who I had cast as Christian, who's no longer Facebook friends with me, so he will never find out about this. I wish I had Kelvin Harrison Jr. as my Christian because I would have cared. I did not care about my Christian. But it was community college. So I will say though, in my production, my Cyrano was very good.
That's more important.
Yeah. But you want to love both of them. That's the whole key to Cyrano, is that you understand why she looks a Christian and does not see Cyrano, but you understand why you want her to be with Cyrano instead.
Yeah.
And then she gets none of them. She gets letters and dead bodies. Poor Roxanne.
Love that for her.
A mood.
All right. Well, obviously, I had to give some information on our dear author of the original play, Edmond. I think that one thing that's really interesting about him is that there actually he's not as well known as a lot of other authors are, in terms of the fact that I think he's always been very overlooked for his work. Cyrano de Bergerac is very famous, and yet a lot of people I don't even think would be able to tell you who wrote it. Mm-hmm. And actually I found a full biography of him in English wasn't available until 2003, which is just weird and wild. But that's a thing. So he was born on April 1st in 1868 in Marseille, France. He is a French playwright whose work is a late example of romantic drama, romantic with a capital R. He was born into a very wealthy and very creative family. His father, Eugene, was a economist and a poet and a translator. And he had an aunt, Victorine, who wrote poetry, and an uncle, Alexis, who was a composer and music critic. So he definitely was born into a creative family, but with the money to be able to pursue that. And in his teens, he began translating and writing poetry while he was in school at the Lycée Marseille. And he attended the Collège Stanislas in Paris from 1884 to 1886. He got very high marks in composition, history, and philosophy. He briefly studied law, mostly to appease his father, but clearly was more engaged with his writing. And he wrote a play with Henry Lee called The Red Glove that premiered in 1888. It was not a success, and most people don't even really acknowledge it these days. But in 1890, he published a poetry collection called Daydreams, or Les Musardises. The same year, he married Rosamond Girard. He actually, I think, dedicated the poetry collection to her. She was also a poet, though after they got married, she sort of quit her own work to focus on helping him with his work, which, is, I guess, what you would expect in the year 1890. But after his death, she actually wrote a biography of him that was published in 1935. They had a son named Jean, who was born in 1894, who grew up to be a biologist and a writer. And he didn't die until I think it was like the 1970s, which is kind of weird to think about. But the first play of Edmond's that was like his alone was the Les Romanesques, which premiered in 1894, the same year that his son was born, and is more famous now, not for the play itself, but for the fact that it was adapted in 1960 into the musical The Fantastics.
Oh.
Yeah, which I didn't know.
Interesting. I like that musical. I had no idea.
Yeah, right? I also was not aware of that, even though I knew that musical. So he wrote a lot of plays, but he's definitely best known for writing Serenaded Bergerac, which was first performed in 1897 in Paris. Constant Coquelin was the first person to play the role of Cyrano. It was really popular in France, then very popular across Europe and the United States. It was sort of seen as standing apart from the very naturalist plays of the era. It's really fast-paced. It has this blend of comedy and emotion. And it was essentially this spot of romance in the midst of a lot of realism on stage. And so people really responded to it, I think partially because of the theatrical landscape in which it came out. I also realized he was only 29 years old when the play opened, which is wild to think about. And unfortunately, he, never really recaptured that success again. He'd had success with the 3 plays that led up to Cyrano, which is The Romancers, The Princess Far Away, and The Woman of Samaria. But he never really achieved these heights again. His other main play that is remembered and still performed today is Lanlon, I think is how you would say it, which premiered in 1900. It's a very patriotic tragedy based around a duke who dies of tuberculosis while he's in prison. But it's maybe more significant. Yeah, right. As you do. But maybe more significant for the fact that Sarah Bernhardt gave one of her most lauded performances in it. She and he were very connected in their careers. In 1901, he was elected to the Académie Française. He was the youngest writer ever to be elected to it. And he continued to write for the rest of his life, but he actually did retire to the countryside. He suffered from very ill health, which is what kept him from serving in World War I, which it seems like he maybe felt some guilt around. He did try to sign up to serve in the army, and he was refused. But he actually did visit trenches, supposedly. And he wrote a collection of very patriotic poems, which didn't do super well. And some scholars think he basically just wrote to appease his guilt over not being able to serve in the army. His last play, The Night of Don Juan, was unfinished at the time of his death, but he was working up to the time of his death. He died of illness. In researching, I found different reports. Some people say he died of the flu. Some people say he died of tuberculosis. A little unclear. Not really sure what's true. Would need to dig further into that. But he died on December 2nd, 1918 in Paris. He was only 50 years old at the time. So he died fairly young. And I think it is in some ways kind of sad that obviously he wrote this great work that is still being adapted today, that is sort of never gone out of popularity since it came out. But at the same time, he had one success. And he never really met it again. Which I don't know, that as a creative person myself, the idea that you would do your most successful thing at 29 and spend the next 2 decades of your life never able to recapture that is just a little sad.
As someone who's getting ready to be 29 in 2 months, it is terrifying.
Right? I think especially because it's not even there are a lot of authors that and playwrights that in their own day had more successes afterwards, but it's one work that we particularly revere nowadays. Mm-hmm. Whereas for him, from what I could find, even in his own time, nobody ever thought he had lived up to Cyrano de Bergerac again. And people kept being oh, maybe the next one will be it. And it never was. And not that he was unsuccessful. He did fine at the box office and stuff, and people didn't think that they were bad plays. They just were well, it's not Cyrano. Which is just, I don't know, it's really sad to think about that. Particularly because he also died while still fairly young. 50 is not that old.
No.
Yeah. Especially weird to think about just in that in that generation, in that time, we lost so many men, so many writers, so many creatives to the war. That like, here's a guy who like, he couldn't even serve in the war and he still died in 1918.
I know, it's the irony.
Right? Yeah. But on the other hand, like I say all of that like it's some very bad, sad thing, and it is, but we're also still adapting Serenaded Bergerac and performing it in its original form today. So
yeah,
he's better off than a lot of people.
This is true. Yeah, that's true. We are still very actively adapting Cyrano de Bergerac. In fact, there has been 19 silver screen adaptations of the play since he first put pen to parchment in 1897, and it has been adapted for television, for radio, for theater. At least he got to see one film adaptation during his time. The first one was put up in 1900, as you said, the French production that starred Benoit Constant Coquelin. We're going to pretend I said that correctly. I thought it was really interesting that there has been an adaptation of Cyrano de Bergerac every decade except for the 1910s and the 2010s.
Oh, interesting.
Every single decade, there has been a film, except for those two same 100-year time periods.
Huh.
Like, I can understand why there was no adaptation in 19-teens. There was a lot of things going on.
Yep, fair enough.
You know, and he had died, and, like, maybe people just didn't want to adapt his work, you know, give some breathing room. But there's no, like, for big film adaptations, I would have thought, at least if I were making Cyrano de Bergerac, like I would have put it up in like 2018 for the anniversary of his death, like the 100-year anniversary.
Right.
A new Cyrano, like
is that whenever the musical came out? Like on stage? I'm just curious if maybe that's what happened, if they like did that to coincide with it, and then
no, because I think that came out at the end of 2019.
Huh.
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
Interesting. Prior to Joe Wright's adaptation, there was an adaptation in 2008. It was made for television. It was not that great, but it did star Kevin Kline as Cyrano. It is okay. But as any millennial with a taste in French literature will know, the very best adaptation of Cyrano de Bergerac before Joe Wright's adaptation is the adaptation that starred Gerard Depardieu. Honestly, like one of the kings of French cinema. The man is so good as Cyrano de Bergerac. But again, there's a lot of, not problems with it, so to speak, but I think one of the bigger problems with the way that adaptation was played is that Gerard Depardieu is still extremely attractive even with the large nose. Like, he is still conventionally attractive in a way that his nose should not have hindered his situation in life.
Yep.
Like enough that you could look beyond that. And I always wondered if the studio had perhaps been like, no, we need to play up that this is Gerard Depardieu. We do not need to make him comically large-nosed or anything like that.
Yeah.
But still, that is one of the ones where he meets the kind of ignoble death that I took great issue with. Because he just kind of like withers and dies, basically. And I think that the way that Joe Wright's adaptation kind of reinvents Cyrano, gives more context to the prejudice that Cyrano faces with people and the reason why that he doesn't believe that he is worthy of love. And those little things I think worked much better in this adaptation. And the two really do, as a Cyrano de Bergerac lover, I've seen basically every adaptation I could get my hands on. These two are very much even with each other. And I don't necessarily know if we'll be able to top these two adaptations. I think we're good. I think we've reached the peak for a while. Now they have tried to quote unquote teen it up. Netflix in the last couple of years has put out two derivative versions of Cyrano de Bergerac. One, which is Sierra Burgess is a Loser, is a lot more fast and loose with it. I would definitely say inspired by rather than adapt it. But then the second, which is the much superior teen Cyrano de Bergerac, is The Half of It, which I know Nicole is very fond of.
I love that movie. I also think The Half of It is really interesting because it feels like the spiritual successor of movies like Clueless and 10 Things I Hate About You, and like movies that were adapting, you know, classic works to teen audiences, which I feel like we had a lot in like a certain period of time, and then it like kind of went away.
Mid-aughts, that was the peak time.
And I feel like The Half of It's a really good example of that sort of using that formula, but in a really new and inventive way, in terms of the fact that like I think that using, you know, having the Cyrano character, having it be the fact that she's like a closeted lesbian in a small town, and her helping like a guy get the girl that she has a crush on is brilliant. Like I can't even talk enough about how brilliant I think that is. Because I also think that that's a very, with the fact that Cyrano is still like the whole premise of it is still pretty like out there, but I think that's such a like grounded idea in many ways. And I just think that the whole thing worked so well. I think it explores some really interesting concepts, and I think the way that it also sort of brings in this new idea of like the sort of background story of it, of her dealing with like being the child of an immigrant in this like small town, and like the racism that particularly her father faces, I think is really beautiful. And I love that film. I don't feel like it got enough recognition, and I don't think enough people saw it when it came out, so I'm always here to shout out that movie.
I agree. It's such a good, very reinventive adaptation. And then there's another derivative adaptation that I think most people are the most familiar with, which is the Steve Martin Roxanne comedy. I am not a fan of it, but in a certain light, I think it's fun. Definitely not on any of my will watch again lists. But I think when people think of Roxanne and they think of Cyrano, I think that is the image they get. Like when I tweeted out, you know, my great love for Cyrano de Bergerac, so many people, particularly people of a certain age demographic, were like, oh my God, Roxanne. And I was like, no, I'm actually talking about the French film with Serenaded Bergerac. I don't know this Steve Martin you speak of.
I get it though, because that's honestly like, I like Clueless fine, but that's kind of how I feel whenever I'm like, I love Emma, and people are like, oh my God, Clueless, and I'm like, no.
I feel the same way about Clueless. I'm like, it's a thing, it's there, it serves a purpose.
Paul Rudd's cute.
It's like, cute.
I disagree with I think the thing about Clueless is I think it's a very fun movie on its own. I actually think it's a pretty terrible adaptation of Emma.
But it does, mentioning Steve Martin and Roxanne does give me the perfect segue for anyone who has been watching Only Murders in the Building to talk about Sting and nice. The Police. See, it really, you laugh. You have not seen the show. You would get the reference if you had watched the show.
I do plan on watching it.
It's
I'm
so
just
good.
Like, I gotta catch up on my 2021 movies first.
But Sting, the lead singer of The Police, wrote a song called Roxanne. He was inspired by a poster for Cyrano de Bergerac that he saw in the lobby of a Nashville hotel that he was staying at while he was on tour. The song was then later used in the movie Moulin Rouge, which has very similar themes to Cyrano de Bergerac, which I did not realize until I was watching this Cyrano. And I was like, oh, this Moulin Rouge,
the Duke
has the Duke, and it was the Duke that reminded me of it. It has the Duke, has the pining, has the, instead of writing letters, he wrote a whole musical to show his love.
That feels like Broke writing letters. Writing a whole ass musical.
And I was like, oh, the two things that had an absolute chokehold on me.
Yep.
Well,
there it is.
Actually, that's a lie. There was 4 things that had a chokehold on me as a teenager.
Okay.
Moulin Rouge.
Yep.
Cyrano de Bergerac. The Phantom of the Opera. And Les Mis.
That's...
And honestly, all of them have to do with pining, because you've got Eponine pining for Marius, you've got the Phantom and Christine, you've got Christian and Satine, and you've got Cyrano and Roxanne.
Everything about you, like, I already knew that.
Yeah.
But to anyone who, like, doesn't know that about you yet, like, everything should have just clicked into place. Like, yeah.
Everyone just got to know me very quickly.
Very intimately.
What is love if not pining?
I mean, same, though. Like,
truly, though.
Like,
I feel like
Maggie can see my Les Mis poster in the background of my video.
Rosette is staring at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you to the French for capitalizing on pining and just like forcing it into all of us at a very young age. But it's really interesting to think of Moulin Rouge as something that perhaps was inspired by, whether intentionally or unintentionally, by the concepts of Cyrano de Bergerac. Because it very much has the same core tenets of somebody who shouldn't be with this woman. There's a duke that gets involved. Mm-hmm. There's death. There's illness. There's all the same kind of tragic points. Which I just think is interesting. And it does it is worthy of questioning why the French are so stuck on pining. Y'all good? Has somebody
Are they okay?
Like, who broke up with you? Who hurt your heart?
Can we check on the French?
Can we check on
all of
the
them?
Penniless sitar players? But yes, there's really no easy segue for me to segue into costuming. So this is my segue. This is my announcement that we are now segueing into a nice little conversation, which is mostly comprised of quotes that I found from the costume designer, which I thought were really interesting. So the costumes for Cyrano were designed by Massimo Cantini Parini. If I said your name incorrectly, I'm very sorry. Ironically, he worked on The Brothers Grimm, starring Matt Damon, which we previously discussed here on Petticoats and Poppies. So, big fan of that connection.
Oh, God.
Don't.
Too much Matt Damon.
I heard you praising Matt Damon before recorded this.
It's true.
So.
I've talked about Matt Damon too much today. I've hit my quota.
You've hit your quota. Okay, I will not make you talk about him any longer.
It's a small quota. I'm gonna overflow my quota soon, and you know why. But
yes.
Yeah.
We all know.
Yeah.
So he is an Italian costume designer. The majority of his work has been in Italian language films, so mostly we're not going to have known them. But from what I've seen, very acclaimed costume designer. He also designed the costumes for the Daisy Ridley-led Ophelia, which also had our boy in it. So
listen, I own that movie on Blu-ray.
Of course you do.
And I will say the costumes are one of the best parts of that film. That film has a whole host of issues. It has more issues than anything else, but
100%.
It also has two of the only blondes in Hollywood I love. And my girl Daisy Ridley. So and gorgeous costumes. So what can you do?
Gorgeous, gorgeous girls love gorgeous, gorgeous gowns. What can we say?
We should trademark that.
We should.
We're
putting
stickers.
the patent in right now.
Yeah.
So in an interview with Variety, he discussed the military costuming choices for Cyrano. He said, Cyrano is a non-commissioned officer of a certain rank, and with Joe Wright, we agreed that he was not going to ever change his costume until the end of the film when he became a poor man. Which I thought was really interesting, because when I was watching this, I thought, why is he wearing the same costume the entire time until the very end? And I think that from a filmmaker viewpoint, it works really well because it reflects this very dramatic change in him. And it also almost feels like it's foretelling his death in a lot of ways because of even the change in the coloring of his clothes. Because he goes from wearing these more beigey and obviously the flash of red for his uniform, but then he goes into this very drab, very dark. And it works as a really nice contrast with Roxanne, who's in that very pure white, very, virginal, very clean, very angel of death welcoming somebody into heaven. Very much those vibes, those feelings. And I think that worked really well. And I'm such a sucker for color use, and I think everything in terms of creating these images throughout the film really worked exceptionally well. I thought it was really interesting. He also talked about how all of the uniforms were made from linen, and in order to get the color that he wanted, he had to dye a ton of samples to find the right shade. In the interview, he said, "I tried to find a shade of red that changed according to the light. It was a true challenge finding the right fabric and the right dyeing procedure, as we made all 300 uniforms that you see on the screen from scratch. We are talking about kilometers of the same fabric that had to be dyed to be all the same color." Incredible. But on top of those 300 costumes in total, Perini and his team built 700 costumes for this film from scratch, rather than using a costume house, which I just was shook by. In the interview, he said, "I wanted to create a completely new world and a unique film," and he explains that this would have been very hard to achieve using hired materials. And I understand this to an extent, especially with the battlefield scene. I think the costumes that they used are very distinctive of a very specific time, and maybe necessarily the costumes the costume shop would not have wanted to be destroyed in mass quite as much as that bloody scene, and so it was much more cost effective than paying those rental fees to destroy things to create their own thing. But also, I think it's really clear that Joe had a very clear image that he was wanting to create, and that Massimo was able to help him find this vision and create these pictures, because everybody's costumes felt like they were cohesive. You know, a lot of times, I don't know if we've necessarily done this recently, but I know in our first season of Petticoats and Poppies, we talked a little bit about some of the dresses that are reused, particularly from one specific British costume warehouse, and that it oftentimes works against what people are intending to do, because those dresses were made for one specific movie in the 80s, and then to reuse them now in like 2018, just it doesn't fit in with the picture of all the dresses that you're making for this specific film. So I think it really works for them to have created everything from scratch, building it from the ground up, because it creates a really cohesive picture and scheme, and everybody's colors and fabrics and styles are all very cohesive. And I think it works really well for this. And I think that ultimately it helps Cyrano be an even better movie, because everything is visually satisfying and nothing takes you out of the moment. And again, that just kind of goes to show like how important costumes are, because, you know, one costume standing out can just like pull you out of the moment. But when you have everything working together as a concert, you know, or it works really well. And I will say, in reading this Variety interview, there was a funny comment that the author made. I didn't even look to see who wrote this, so I'm very sorry if you, for some reason, listen to our podcast. But the author makes this comment about how the lack of jewelry and embellishments and patterns in the costuming was accurate for the 18th century, and that apparently they believed the costuming in the 18th century was very drab. No.
What?
I literally like read the sentence twice and I was like, incorrect.
It's not.
But the thing is like, I wish they had just like added a little bit more, like, in the stripped down version of the 18th century, which Cyrano is. And Cyrano feels very much like a stage production. Like, as much as it is a movie, it is still very much its original form. And in doing so, it really helps you focus on the actors and their performances and what they're saying. And you're not getting caught up in looking at the pretty jewelry on her neck or the stripes of her dress or what kind of rickrack or lace or, you know, embellishments are on the dresses. And I think it works really well to have these natural fibers like linens and cottons and muslins, and it works really well, but it's not accurate for the 18th century. They most definitely would have had lots of embellishments and buttons and doodads and jewels, and I definitely think Roxanne would have had a lot more finery on her at certain points in it. And they often have to do that. And I think that works really well. And I think rather than saying that this was common in the 18th century, I think explaining the rationale behind that choice in this would have made a little bit more sense. But that's fine. Variety is 50% right. But yeah, I think, from a costuming standpoint, I think that this movie really did a fantabulous job presenting a very stripped down 18th century fashion. The shapes all work. All the shapes were right. And that's really what I focus on, because so often people get shapes wrong for dresses. They mix up their centuries and their decades. And this did not do that. It just did not have over embellishment.
I also just think that like the silhouettes being right is such a clear indication that like the costume designer did their research, and whatever other anachronisms there are, they were done purposefully. If the silhouettes are correct, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, if the silhouettes are right, I'm like, okay, well, at least we know that they like tried.
Exactly. They tried.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us in our 38th episode about Cyrano, which is available to rent on Prime Video and several other streaming sites.
We'd love to hear from you on social media and to hear what you think of Cyrano.
And you can find us on social media at HGATM Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find Maggie over at Maggie of the Town, and you can find me at Nicole Ackman 16.
You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Airglue Media website, and Audible. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a rating on Apple Podcast and on Podchaser, and on Spotify now you can leave reviews and ratings. Every few episodes we'll be reading our reviews, so be sure to leave one if you would like to be featured.
We'll be back soon with another episode as we continue to look at period films from a history and film perspective.
You've been listening to Petticoats and Poppies.
History Girls at the Movies. The countryside, he suffered from very ill health his entire life, which is what kept him from serving. Like 50 is not that old.